What happens when emotions take over? Work suffers, relationships break, peace disappears. Japanese philosophers solved this problem centuries ago with 4 simple techniques that transform feelings instead of suppressing them. Their system helped them stay calm during difficult times and works just as well in today's world. The first method instantly changes how you handle emotional moments. A technique refined through centuries of real-world testing. Part 1. Heihō Kadensho. In 1632, master swordsman Yagyu Munenori stood calmly as 3 assassins approached the shogun he was sworn to protect. The shogun's other guards tensed visibly, hands trembling on their sword hilts, but Munenori's face showed no fear, no tension, just perfect clarity. The assassins hesitated, confused by his unusual composure. In that moment of their uncertainty, Munenori moved with lightning precision, disarming the first attacker, while positioning himself between the threat and the shogun. The remaining assassins, seeing their advantage lost, retreated rather than facing his unshakable presence. What appeared to witnesses as extraordinary courage wasn't suppression of fear. It was something far more powerful. Munenori had transformed his emotional position entirely. Throughout his career as the shogun's personal protector, Munenori repeatedly demonstrated this remarkable emotional clarity under extreme pressure. So valuable was this ability that the shogun commanded him to record his approach for future generations. The result was Heihō Kadensho, the life-giving sword, a text that would be studied by Japan's ruling class for centuries. While superficially about swordsmanship, its deeper wisdom addressed something far more fundamental: mastery of the mind itself. Munenori's core insight seems almost too simple. Emotions aren't things that happen to you, but positions you consciously adopt. This runs contrary to how most of us experience emotions. We feel anger rising within us, fear gripping us, or anxiety overwhelming us, as if these emotions are invaders we must either fight or surrender to. Munenori recognized this as a fundamental misconception. Just as a swordsman changes stance based on his opponent and terrain, he taught that the mind can shift between 5 emotional positions. The first position is like a mountain, projecting strength and stability. When a samurai stood in mountain position, opponents could feel his unshakable presence before any movement occurred. The second position is like a river, flowing, observant, neutral. In this position, you neither advance nor retreat, but simply observe with perfect clarity, allowing situations to reveal themselves without emotional distortion. The third position is like a reed, appearing to yield while actually redirecting. When strong winds blow, the rigid tree breaks while the flexible reed bends, then returns to position. This emotional stance absorbs pressure, then channels it elsewhere. The fourth position is like wind, unexpected movement that changes the entire dynamic. When opponents prepare for direct confrontation, suddenly shifting to an unexpected emotional position creates profound advantage. The fifth position is like shadow, complete repositioning that transforms the nature of the interaction. Shadow doesn't fight light, it simply exists in a different dimension, rendering direct opposition impossible. These weren't abstract concepts, but practical positions Munenori taught the shogun to adopt in different situations. When the third Tokugawa shogun, Iemitsu, faced a political crisis that threatened civil war, his advisors urged immediate aggressive action. The mountain position, they believed, projected necessary strength. The council chamber filled with tense voices arguing for decisive military deployment. The shogun, trained in Munenori's method, recognized this default response as potentially disastrous. Instead of reacting with his habitual forceful command, he consciously shifted to the river position. Quiet, observant neutrality. This unexpected shift changed the entire dynamic of the council. As the shogun maintained perfect, composed observation, his advisors gradually calmed their own emotional positions. In this new clarity, diplomatic options invisible during their emotional reactivity suddenly emerged. Rather than deploying troops, the shogun sent a carefully worded message to the potential rebels. The crisis that might have cost thousands of lives was resolved without a single arrow fired, all because one man changed his emotional position. We see the same dynamic in everyday situations, though few recognize it consciously. When criticized unfairly at work, most people default to either mountain position, aggressive defense, or reed position, emotional collapse. Both actually positions of weakness because they're reactive rather than chosen. Those trained in Munenori's approach recognize these as merely default positions. They might consciously shift to river position, neutral observation that allows them to see the situation without emotional distortion. Or perhaps to wind position, an unexpected response that changes the entire interaction. The beauty of Munenori's approach is its simplicity. You don't need complex emotional regulation techniques or years of meditation. The next time you feel strong emotions rising, simply ask, what position am I taking right now? What position would serve better? This awareness alone creates the first transformation. You move from being positioned by emotions to positioning yourself emotionally. But Munenori knew that positioning alone wasn't enough. To truly master emotions, you need to understand what happens in the critical space between trigger and response. Part 2. Ma, the sacred pause. Tea Master Senno Rikyu once served Japan's most powerful and volatile warlord, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a leader known for executing servants for minor errors. During an important ceremony witnessed by assembled lords, Rikyu accidentally spilled a drop of tea on the tatami mat. The room fell silent. Everyone knew Hideyoshi's legendary temper. The warlord's hand moved slightly toward his sword. Instead of panicking or apologizing frantically, Rikyu created a deliberate pause. In that brief interval, what Japanese philosophy calls ma, he studied the fallen drop. Then, with perfect composure, he used his utensil to transform the accident into an elegant design, incorporating it into the ceremony as if it had been intentional all along. Hideyoshi's hand relaxed. By the ceremony's end, rather than punishment, the warlord expressed new respect for the tea master. Later, he told his advisors, that moment of pause showed more courage than any battlefield charge. This seemingly simple story contains profound wisdom about emotional mastery. The Japanese concept of ma represents the meaningful space between things, the silence between musical notes, the emptiness that gives form to a vase, and most importantly, the interval between emotional trigger and response. Throughout Japanese culture, this space is recognized as sacred. It appears in garden design, architecture, conversation, and art. But its most powerful application is in emotional life, where this interval is the birthplace of freedom. Consider a simple observation. Watch how children respond to emotions. Reaction is immediate and automatic. A child feels anger and instantly lashes out. They feel fear and immediately retreat. Now watch how masters respond. There is always a space, however brief, between trigger and response. This isn't hesitation, it's presence. In that tiny interval lies the entire difference between reaction and response, between being controlled by emotions and having choice. Japanese arts cultivated this quality through deliberate practice. Zen archers would hold their draw for extended periods, not to build physical strength, but to create ma, the space where perfect action emerges naturally. When master swordsman Miyamoto Musashi wrote that the way of strategy is the way of nature, he was referring partly to this natural interval that exists between all things. By extending this interval consciously, mastery becomes possible. In our accelerated world, this sacred space has been compressed almost to nothing. Messages demand immediate response. News triggers instant reaction. Conflicts escalate because no one creates space for clarity to emerge. Yet the solution remains as simple now as it was in Rikyu's time. Creating even a short pause changes everything. A breath before responding to criticism, an hour before answering a heated message, a night before making an emotional decision. The beauty of ma is that the pause itself becomes a powerful response. When someone criticizes you harshly, and you simply create space rather than immediately defending or attacking, the entire dynamic shifts. That space often accomplishes more than any words could. Japanese philosophy recognized that this interval is where true emotional mastery lives, not in controlling emotions, not in expressing them perfectly, but in the sacred space where choice becomes possible. Part 3. Mizu no Kokoro, the water mind. With strategic positioning and the sacred pause, you've created a foundation for emotional mastery. But what quality of mind fills this space most effectively? When Morihei Ueshiba, founder of Aikido, was challenged by 5 attackers simultaneously, witnesses described an extraordinary scene. As the men rushed toward him from different directions, Ueshiba moved like water, calm on the surface, yet powerful in movement. Without apparent effort, he redirected each attacker's energy, causing them to collide with each other or fall harmlessly aside. Most remarkable was his face throughout, completely serene, showing neither strain nor triumph. This wasn't suppression of emotion, it was transformation through mizu no kokoro, mind like water. Water embodies three paradoxical qualities that make it the perfect metaphor for emotional mastery. When still, water reflects reality perfectly, like a mountain lake showing an undistorted image of the world. This quality allows clear perception without emotional coloring. When flowing, water adapts to any container or obstacle without resistance, maintaining its essence while changing its form. This allows responsiveness without rigidity. When directed, water generates immense power, not through force but through alignment with natural principles. This creates impact without exhaustion. Japanese calligraphy masters would meditate on water before creating their most important works. Business leaders would contemplate flowing streams before major negotiations. This wasn't poetic ritual but practical preparation for emotional fluidity. In modern life, we face emotional challenges that seem like immovable obstacles. Difficult colleagues, unexpected setbacks, persistent problems. Most people either fight against these realities, creating exhaustion, or surrender completely, losing their integrity. Water teaches a different response, neither rigid resistance nor passive surrender, but adaptive harmony. It doesn't struggle with obstacles. It flows around them while maintaining its essential nature. This water-like quality emerges naturally through three simple breaths. First breath, imagine still water, reflecting reality without distortion. Second breath, visualize flowing water, moving around obstacles without resistance. Third breath, feel water's directed power, aligned with, rather than against natural forces. When facing criticism that would normally trigger defensiveness, this water mind transforms the experience completely. Instead of a threat to resist, criticism becomes information to reflect upon, a pathway to flow around, or energy to redirect toward growth. The water mind creates perfect adaptability in the moment, but maintaining this state requires one final element that ensures lasting transformation. Part 4. Kaizen, the path of small steps. In 1945, Japan lay in ruins. Cities destroyed, industry collapsed, the economy shattered. Toyota Motor Company, once thriving, faced extinction in this devastated landscape. The challenges confronting company leader Sakichi Toyoda would have overwhelmed most executives. The natural response would be dramatic action, radical restructuring, massive layoffs, complete reinvention. Instead, Toyota applied a philosophy that would transform not just his company, but his entire approach to adversity. Kaizen, continuous improvement through small steps. Rather than attempting to rebuild everything at once, he focused on improving one tiny element of production each day. One process, one component, one movement at a time. His approach seemed maddeningly slow to Western observers. But within a decade, this patient accumulation of small improvements had not only saved Toyota, but positioned it to become one of the world's most successful companies. The wisdom of Kaizen runs counter to our instincts about transformation. We're drawn to dramatic breakthroughs, complete reinventions, heroic journeys of change. Instead of trying to transform your entire emotional landscape at once, simply focus on improving your response to one specific trigger. Perhaps it's the email from that particular colleague that always sets you off, or the family dinner conversation that reliably creates tension. When you make your response to that one trigger just slightly better, not perfect, just better, everything begins to shift. Like water slowly reshaping stone, these tiny improvements accumulate into profound transformation. The simple practice is this. Each week, choose just one emotional trigger and make one small improvement in how you respond. This isn't about perfection, it's about progress. What makes Kaizen so powerful for emotional mastery is that it aligns with how we actually change. Small improvements compound over time into what appears to be effortless mastery, precisely because it developed naturally rather than through force. The Japanese understanding is that true transformation doesn't come from dramatic change, but from patient refinement. One small step, then another, then another. These 4 Japanese approaches aren't isolated techniques, but form a natural sequence that transforms how you experience emotions completely. Heihō Kadensho teaches strategic positioning, changing your fundamental relationship with emotions. Rather than being positioned by feelings, you consciously choose your emotional stance based on what the situation truly requires. Ma creates the sacred space between trigger and response, giving you freedom of choice rather than automatic reaction. In that interval, no matter how brief, possibilities emerge that remain invisible during emotional reactivity. Mizu no Kokoro fills that space with the water mind, providing adaptable strength that reflects reality clearly, flows around obstacles effortlessly, and channels energy powerfully without resistance. Kaizen ensures this transformation lasts through small, continuous improvements, building emotional mastery that appears effortless precisely because it developed naturally rather than through force. Starting with just one creates a foundation for the others to develop naturally. Like the Japanese masters who refined these approaches over centuries, you'll discover that true emotional mastery isn't about perfect control, but perfect harmony, a way of being that transforms how you experience every aspect of life.